Good evening. So let's start our discussion with some questions and answer writing session we will take. So some discussion on the basis of what you realize is some questions on modern India. And subformative answers. So here, uh, let us see questions on modern India. Okay, this is the question. Discuss the course of revolutionary movement in 1920s and 1930s with special focus on revolutionary activities in Bengal. We will start with some elementary type and then after we'll go to advanced level. So let us see the first question, that is to discuss the course of revolutionary activities in 1920s and 1930s with special focus on revolutionary activities in Bengal. So look, what are the content that normally we take here? We will start like this, that out of many streams of Indian national movement, moderate, extremist, revolutionaries. The revolutionary movement, although very short-lived, but it had a differential approach of active resistance, and it had created the mass euphoria, which added nationalism and dimension of the mass movement. So initial start we will take from here, and thereafter when we start explaining the revolutionary movement of 1920s, this phase of the revolutionary movement generally we refer as a second phase of the revolutionary movement. So second phase means after suspension of non-cooperation movement. After suspension of non-cooperation movement. So here the after suspension of non-cooperation movement, the frustration of the youth once again very much surfaced, and at the same time those youth who left the revolutionary activities and then participated in the Gandhian movement because they wanted Gandhi to take the lead. Since Gandhi came to India as a youth icon, therefore all the revolutionaries, those who were operating in India and abroad, they decided to give Gandhian movement a chance. So after the advent of Gandhi, the first phase had suppressed. But once the non-cooperation movement was withdrawn in 1922, once again the political frustration came to the same level. And this political frustration oftenly resulted in the form of violence. So political frustration oftenly resulted in the form of violence. So here the political frustration, well, in 1920s caused some different dimension of the revolutionaries. The first important thing, that this phase of the revolutionary movement was more organized. They had a proper objectivity. The revolutionaries, they had proper objectivity like republicanism, like socialism and secularism. Three important objectives the early revolutionaries were having in the 1920s. Particularly, all the revolutionary movement had left orientation. They were related to socialism and communism. So left orientation was the main theme of the revolutionaries. So republicanism, socialism and secularism. They were inspired by book of Bhagwati Charan Bohra. So Bhagwati Charan Bohra, he wrote philosophy of bomb. So you come to know that today we have the so many philosophies in the world, but at least you have philosophy of bomb. So philosophy of bomb written by Bhagwati Charan Bohra. Then Sarat Chandra, he wrote, he was a very prominent author of Bengal. So Sarat Chandra, he wrote Pather Dabi. Sachin Sanyal, he wrote Bandi Jeevan. Bandi Jeevan. So these are the important books that was published during this time, which greatly influenced the Indian revolutionaries. So particularly when we talk about the reference to Bengal, in this phase of the revolutionary, mainly in the 1930s, we cannot ignore the fact that Suri Sen had played a very important role in organizing the revolutionary movement at its zenith in Bengal. So Suri Sen, we'll write about the Suri Sen Indian Republican Association and participation of the youth of Bengal. Participation of youth of Bengal. So participation of youth, particularly the women, you have to take all the names. Priti Lata, Kalpana Datta, Santi Ghosh, Suniti Chaudhary, Beena Das. So these are the names which had rocked the British sentiments, British control in the 1930s. Right. So these are the revolutionaries. You can take the name of all and then you can suffix this question. It was a very easy question, but I told you that we'll start from the elementary kind of thing and then you'll conclude that although revolutionary movement failed to get immediate objective, but its mass endurance and the long-term implication was that each and every revolutionary movement, there was mass euphoria in which the dimension of nationalism had increased, and at the same time, the momentum of the pressure on the British also increased, which we can see during the Quit India movement. So, Quit India movement, after a long time, revolutionary resurfaced and gave massive violence to all the outdoor. Right? So this is 1930s. So look at the question that I told you. Discuss the course of revolutionary movement in 1920s and 1930s with special focus on revolutionary movement of Bengal. So it was a very easy question and you can tackle it very easily. Second question before the screen is, growth of Indian nationalism was due to both external factors as well as internal factors. Elucidate. So look, the growth of Indian nationalism is mainly due to the external factor as well as internal factors. You'll start that in the second half of 19th century, there was rise of nationalism in many parts of the world. And in India also, the national sentiments, because before the revolt of 1857, the common Indians were more comfortable in identifying themselves as Gujarati, Marathi, Telugu, Tamil, whence regional identity overshadowed the national identity. Regional identity overshadowed the national identity. Regional identity overshadowed the national identity. So now the common Indians were more comfortable in identifying themselves as Indian compared to the what they had the regional identity. Okay, fine. Second. Then coming to the main parts of this question. No doubt in this, that tools and mechanism used by British, listen the sentence carefully. The tools and mechanism used by British to exercise control over India. Similar tools and mechanism used by Indians to overthrow British rule from India. Right? So tools and mechanism used by British to exercise control over India, similar tools and mechanism used by Indians to overthrow British rule from India. Right? This is what is proper ways to discuss it. So tools and mechanism used by British to exercise control over India, similar tools and mechanism. So here the one factor is the British policy, no doubt in this. So among the internal factor, we control the internal factor with both the British policies and indigenous awareness, Indian awareness. So among the British policies and then awareness among the Indians. Awareness among the Indians. So among the British policies, the first is, that is politico-administrative unification. Politico-administrative unification. Second is introduction of English. Third is use of printing press. Use of printing press. Okay. Fourth is, that is development of means of communication. So development of means of communication, railways, telegraph, fine. So use of printing press means what? Suppose the British started publication of the books, and many books contained the political philosophy of the West, and that is the reason why the Indians also got aware about equality, liberty, fraternity, and at the same time Indians also came across with many fundamental things, legislativism, democracy, humanism, all fundamental things. So this is means of communication. Then socio-religious reform movement. This is internal awareness generated among the Indians. Socio-religious reform movement. So socio-religious reform movement itself was a very dynamic thing that had happened in India. The impact was quite open, that all the social reformers, their issues was not only confined to the women or the religion or the culture, but they had a broad agenda of the political reform. They had broad agenda of the economic reform. Fine. So therefore here we have development of political nationalism, we have development of economic nationalism and cultural nationalism both. So internal factor includes both the things. The British policies, I told you, the tools and mechanism used by British to exercise control over India. Similar tools and mechanism used by Indians to overthrow British rule from India. So whatever British was trying to consolidate its position in India in the form of colonial control, obviously the Indians had a sharp reaction. Even the British policy of divide and rule, which was well understood by the Indians, had big implications in the rise of nationalism. Okay. Then next dimension of the nationalism is awareness among the Indians. So Indians were a good awareness, no doubt in this, because after the 19th century, it had got exposure from the various factors. This exposure was related to reforms presented by reformers. So political nationalism, economic nationalism and cultural nationalism. Okay, but among the international factor that led to the rise of nationalism, no doubt in this, that French Revolution is single most event in the world. The French Revolution started in 1789. So single most event in the world, which is influencing the world order even today, right? So the biggest ideals of the French Revolution, equality, liberty, and fraternity, it had created the ground for the rise of nationalism all over the world. So nationalism evolved mainly in the context of these French revolutionary ideas. Then secondly, immediate implication of the French Revolution was beginning of beginning of unification of Italy and Germany. Unification of Italy and Germany. Fine. This is the exactly what the plan of French revolutionary idea was: unification of Italy and Germany. There is a very close similarity between the unification of Germany did by Bismarck and unification of Germany did by unification of India by Vallabhbhai Patel. All the efforts taken by Bismarck except the war, the Vallabhbhai Patel had used the technique, and after India became a nation. It's a huge implication. Then some events like in 1897, Ethiopia defeated Italy. You know, uh, tiny, or you can say the African country, which is considered as the most backward, defeated the mighty Italians. This was one of the biggest setback that Europeans had ever faced. Then in 1945, Japan defeated Russia. A tiny Asian country defeated the mighty European. So these are the events who actually break the invincibility of the West. So Westerns were considered as invincible, cannot be defeated. But these two events had break the invincibility of the West. And therefore, Indians were very much encouraged to challenge the Britishers. It had created a wave of aggressive nationalism in India. So, my dear, look at the question and try to understand what actually the framework is. The framework: growth of Indian nationalism was due to both external factors as well as internal factors. Okay, so you have to manage all the facts and figures together in order to get the best part of the question. Okay, so it was easy question to guide. No doubt in this, you can make this question much easier also. Verse. Look at the question number third. The question number third in your on your scheme. So here question number third says the Bengal united is a power. Bengal divided will pull Bengal in several different ways. In the light of this statement, discuss that Lord Curzon did historical mistake which ultimately resulted in aggressive nationalism. Okay, that's a very nice question. Bengal united is a power, but Bengal divided will pull Bengal in several different ways. Will pull Bengal in several different ways. So, in the light of this statement, discuss that Lord Curzon did historical mistake which ultimately resulted in aggressive nationalism. Look, we'll start. Bengal. We'll write in the introduction. The Bengal was a nerve center of nationalism. Nerve center of nationalism. All the ideologies of national movement, moderate, revolutionary, extremist, all comes out from the Bengal, and it had spreaded in different parts of India. So it was a birthplace of many strands and many trends of the national movement. So whether it was a moderate, whether it was extremist, whether it was revolutionary, all ideologies coming out of the Bengal and thereafter spreaded in different parts of India. So Bengal was nerve center of nationalism. Fine, that was a good thing to start. But in order to break the solidarity of the national movement and to pursue the policy of divide and rule, Lord Curzon decided to divide Bengal, which had a very boomerang effect on British and then led to the rise of aggressive nationalism in India. So with these words, you will start the introduction part and then you write the main body. So you'll start the main body that in the beginning of 20th century, the momentum of Indian national movement had increased. So British also introduced policy of divide and rule, in which Lord Curzon and Lord Minto played a significant role in the beginning. Lord Curzon and Lord Minto played a very significant role in the beginning. So we'll start from here. Fine. Then you change the paragraph and then start like this. Curzon, he was masterpiece of the policy of divide and rule. Curzon had already made it clear that the partition of Bengal is mainly for the administrative reason, because administrative reason, because Bengal was a big state, and in order to have proper administrative manageability, we need to divide Bengal. This is the statement of Lord Curzon. Officially it was said, but there were many provinces in India much bigger than Bengal. Bombay, Madras. So if size is the problem of the administrative region, then the Bombay should have been divided, Madras should have been divided. But it was not the administrative region, but the Curzon's effort was guided by different intentions. Right? What is the intention? Look at the intention of the partition of Bengal. Curzon said, look how the Hindu-Muslim divide was projected by this. Curzon said that since the days of Prophet Muhammad, Muslims are fighting for their own homeland, and it is the biggest responsibility of the British to provide them. So how intense was going on wild the card to drag the Muslim appeasement. Okay, so Curzon said that since the days of Prophet Muhammad, Muslims are fighting for their own homeland, so it is the biggest responsibility of the British to provide them. Okay, so Curzon wanted to divide Bengal on the basis of demographic inequality. The western side, it was Hindu majority and Muslim minority. Muslim minority, and here Muslim majority and Hindu minority. So this is how the demographic inequality and minority consciousness, here Muslim minority, here Hindu minority. So both sides. And that could be beautifully used by, because minority consciousness is cohesive. The British always use minority against the majority because majority is always divided. So thereby it was easy for the British to spread the social crisis which is called communism. Communalism. Right? So communalism is a social division. If Hindus and Muslims will get divided, it will weaken the mass base of nationalism. So Curzon wanted to divide Bengal in order to create Hindu-Muslim divide. Okay. Secondly, the economic crisis. Sabka saath, sabka vikas. If there is no saath, then no vikas. So economic crisis will also grip the Bengal. So partition of Bengal will leave Bengal in a social economic crisis. And that is how you can see these crises are fundamental. And due to these crises, there is a local problems. And once there is a local problem, then feeling of nationalism will be subsided. So this is the design of the Curzon. But after the partition of Bengal was announced, there was huge reaction. Huge reaction. Not only in Bengal, but in different parts of India. And when the Tamilians, when the Marathi, they started opposing the partition of Bengal, simply the nationalism did not subsided, but it had soared up. So therefore, this was a big mistake by the Curzon, because he failed to understand the undercurrent of the nationalism. Okay, so therefore, once the partition of Bengal was announced, 16th October 1905, partition of Bengal was announced. It was announced by Lord Minto. Fine, and this partition of Bengal, altogether, there was a massive reaction of the public. And then, if Punjabi, if Marathi, if Tamilian started opposing the partition of Bengal, then nationalism had suits up. Even because of this, the extremist section of Indian National Congress, they got huge support, right? Then Swadeshi movement had also increased a lot. So Swadeshi movement, which was a very reactionary movement, it had reduced the British import in India, British export in India. So substantial reduction of the British goods, import of the British goods in India, because of the Swadeshi movement. Because of the Swadeshi movement, Indians got complete awareness to have the idea of self-dependency. So Swadeshi movement was all comprehensive movement which shaped the future movements of India, including the Gandhian movement. Okay, so that caused because of the partition of Bengal. And ultimately, in 1911, the British had no option but to take back the partition of Bengal. Okay, so this is a huge success as far as the Indian nationalism is concerned. But at the same time, I will tell you that Curzon's mistake and the mistakes of Lord Minto caused huge damage to the British control mechanism. Curzon had lots of dreams. Curzon said that after partition of Bengal, So, this statement, how you'll say this statement, Curzon and British Home Secretary Ridgely, right? Curzon and British Home Secretary Ridgely, right? Ridgely said to Curzon, sent a telegram to Curzon. Symbolically, Bengal united is a power. Bengal divided will pull Bengal in several different ways. He was a Home Secretary of Britain. And of course, Curzon is a viceroy. So they had a communication through telegram. And then Ridgely sent a telegram to Curzon, Bengal united is a power. And Bengal divided will pull Bengal in several different ways. So several different ways means that the social crisis of the Bengal, economic crisis of the Bengal will create so much tension within the perspective, within the nature. And this is how the Curzon and Ridgely had defined the fantastic argument. Okay, so Curzon and Ridgely. Bengal united is a power. So this is the statement. Bengal united is a power. And Bengal divided will pull Bengal in several different ways. Will pull Bengal in several different ways. So Bengal united is a power. Now come to the next question. Political freedom is life breath of any nation. This is a very bold statement. Political freedom is the life breath of any nation. In the light of this statement, discuss that Aurobindo Ghosh gave genesis to the extremism and passive resistance. Genesis to the extremism and passive resistance. This is a very nice question. So political freedom is the life breath. Aurobindo Ghosh, he was rightly called as father of extremism. Father of extremism. Or father of passive resistance. Father of passive resistance. So Aurobindo Ghosh, he was one of the most and the earliest exponent who criticized the aggressive policy of colonialism in India. Aurobindo Ghosh said, if you can rival the authoritative system by popular government. By popular government. You can rival the authoritative system by popular government. Right. So this is how the Aurobindo Ghosh was actually saying that the government of India should be Indians. That is called popular government. Then this government will rival the authoritative system of the state. Then Aurobindo Ghosh demanded free constitution. Free constitution is a very important term. So free constitution means the constitution should not be guided by the British Parliament, the British motive of colonialism, but Indians should have its own framework of the constitution. Constitution for India constitution by the Indians. So Aurobindo Ghosh was very much into the challenging the mode of British authoritative system. Then Aurobindo Ghosh, he joined Anushilan Samiti. Anushilan Samiti was generally regarded as a revolutionary network. So he was associated with Anushilan Samiti. Aurobindo Ghosh, he wrote New Lamps for Old, in which he explained the doctrine of passive resistance. New Lamps for Old, in which he explained the doctrine of passive resistance. Passive resistance in which there is no harm of life but doing something so that normal function should not function. This is called dynamics of passive resistance. So new lamps for old and normal function do not function. This is work of Aurobindo Ghosh. So Anushilan Samiti was an organization which had great excitement of the revolutionary thing. Aurobindo Ghosh, he wrote Savitri. This is a poetry, highly nationalist poetry, in which he used the word Savitri, in which he used the word Bharat Mata. We are not fighting for the land. This is motherland. Matri Bhumi, motherland. So Bharat Mata. So Aurobindo Ghosh, he was the pioneer to achieve the class of the passive resistance, which shaped the future extremist tendencies in International Congress. It had shaped the revolutionary judgment because you'll write that idea of the revolutionary movement, idea of extremist, that how to oppose the mighty colonial rule, actually this idea was practically implemented by revolutionaries. So therefore, Aurobindo Ghosh is rightly said that the political freedom is life breath of any nation. India does not have the political freedom, and that is how the Indian freedom is not guaranteeing, and therefore it is a dead nation. There's no breathing of the nation because the citizens of the nation is subjugated. So he charged the Indians to break the barrier of slavery. Okay, so this is how you will write this question straight away. It was easy question, that why you must know the philosophy related to Aurobindo Ghosh. So political freedom is the life breath of any nation. In the light of this statement, discuss that Aurobindo Ghosh gave genesis to the extremism and passive resistance. You'll find that whatever I have discussed right now, entire scenario was very much involved in discussion of extremism and passive resistance. Actually, this statement, the political freedom is life breath of any nation, this statement is the statement of Aurobindo Ghosh. Statement of Aurobindo Ghosh. Oh, that's a fine thing. Throughout the British period, intensity of the colonialism keep on rising, but objective of colonialism always remained the same. That is attainment of Swaraj. That is, but objective of the colonialism always remained the same. That is, till India achieved the Swaraj, the British had sole nature to define the colonialism, that the exploitation of India and benefit to England. Look, we have two words, imperialism and colonialism. Imperialism signifies the political control. Okay, imperialism, it signifies the political control. So let us take the fifth question. Let us take the fifth question. Fifth question. First, understand one thing, that what is imperialism and what is colonialism. Imperialism and colonialism both have the same objective and same effect. Both have the same objective and same effect. Okay. Imperialism means political control, and colonialism means economic control. So political control and economic control. So imperialism and colonialism. So after political control, exploitation of colony to benefit the mother country. To benefit the mother country. Exploitation of colony to benefit the mother country. This is called colonialism. This is called colonialism. Exploitation to benefit the mother country. This is called colonialism. Okay. So both imperialism and colonialism had same objective and same effect. So the colonial phase, it had started in 1757 and it lasted till 1947. So according to R.P. Dutt, he wrote a book, India Today. India Today. So R.P. Dutt, he wrote a book, India Today. In this book, he divided the three phases of colonialism. Three phases of colonialism. So first phase, it is called phase of mercantilism. Second phase, it is called phase of free trade. Third phase, it is called phase of finance capitalism. So mercantilism, free trade and finance capitalism. These are the three phases of colonialism. Mercantilism refers to what? The mercantilism refers to the announcement in which the state itself involved in trading benefit, or state is regulating all the trading benefit. So here the social policy was not to interfere. Political policy was indirect subordination, and economic policy, how to use this position for benefit of the English trading system. How to use this position. So first phase of mercantilism, when East India Company transformed into political power, and then 1757 capture of Bengal. So the trade of Bengal was beautifully captured by East India Company, and thereafter experiment was made 1757 to 1813. The trade, the most important consequence was the trade. Second important consequence was permanent settlement in Bengal. So permanent settlement, the extraction of land revenue, it gave huge success. The most consistent source of income of India, it was taken by the Britishers, right? Because you understand that agricultural output is the most important output. Agricultural output was the most important output. So 1757 to 1813, the trade had huge benefit. Trade has huge benefit. And then permanent settlement. This is agricultural output. Then second, 1813 to 1860. This is called phase of free trade. Phase of free trade. So free trade system was introduced. Free trade system was introduced. This trading system had obvious output. Okay, so many British companies came to India, and it had taken very firm control over the exploitation of the Indian raw material to benefit the industrial revolution of England. And secondly, Rayatwari settlement and Mahalbari settlement was introduced during this age. Okay, so social policy was massive interference in the affairs of Indians. You know, this is the time when so many descriptions can be seen that India was badly exploited by the British, and thereafter there was firm control over it. Okay. Political policy was also the massive expensive. But the third phase, 1860 to 1947. This is phase of finance capitalism. Paisa lagao, paisa kamao. So finance capitalism. So in this phase, there was development of railways. In this phase, there was development of banking, insurance, industries. So many things had come across during this phase. It was looking that India is developing by the British. But unfortunately, during this period, the many significant feature come across with, and it was the development of underdevelopment. Development of underdevelopment. Alp vikas ka vikas. So development of underdevelopment had taken place during this phase. Although the political policy was to consolidate its position in India, the political policy was to push the policy of divide and rule, and at the same time, when the mass movement started, it is the policy of compromise with respect to the nationalism, Indian national movement, and the mass movement, and the mass movement. Indian national movement and mass movement. So railways, banking, insurance, all had taken the due respect. So development of underdevelopment. Al विकास का विकास. Okay, so third phase of capitalism. So these are the factors. So in all three phases, you will conclude that intensity of the colonialism keep on increasing, but objective of colonialism always remained the same. That is exploitation of India to benefit England. So the beauty of London was basically the bones and bloods of cotton weavers of India and the peasants of India. So earlier it was understood that P for peasants and P for prosperous. Now it became P for peasants and now it had become P for poor. So P for peasant and P for poor. And P for peasants and P for prosperous. This is the fundamental change you can observe in the phase of colonialism. Okay. So this question, you can tackle this question in a very easy manner. Read the question again. So throughout the British period, intensity of colonialism keep on changing, but objective of colonialism always remained the same, and that is attainment of Swaraj. Objective of colonialism always remained the same, that is till the attainment of Swaraj, there was reaction, there was a massive exploitation of the Indians. Okay, it's not, they change the sentence here. So till the attainment of the Swaraj by the India, the intensity of the colonialism always remained the same. Next question is the third Anglo-Maratha war decisively proved the victory of British over Marathas. What were the main reasons for the defeat of the Maratha? It is a very straight question. So the third Anglo-Maratha war, if you understand this question decisively, then this is the sixth question. Among the many Indian powers, Maratha gave strongest challenge to British. So Maratha was strongest challenger to British as well as strongest successor of Mughal. So if you want to define the might of the Maratha power, then the two sentences are enough. Among the various Indian powers, Maratha was strongest successor of Mughal as well as Maratha was strongest challenger to British. Fine. So these two sentences clearly exhibit the power of the Maratha after decline of Mughal Empire. Power of the Maratha after decline of Mughal Empire. Decline of Mughal Empire. So among the various Indian powers. So immediately after the death of great Peshwas, the British interference had started. In fact, the internal dissension of the Maratha paved the way for the British interference. And British was such a mighty power and with such a modern military firepower that the traditional military of Maratha did not sustain. And therefore, Maratha lost the battle. So here, you'll start the question like this, and then in the answer, the main body, you'll write all the reasons behind the defeat of Maratha. So first reason you'll discuss, that is internal disunity. Internal disunity means at the time of crisis, Maratha never united. Maratha never united. At the time of crisis, Maratha never united. So, internal disunity. So, at the time of crisis, Maratha never united, and at the same time, Maratha had internal dissensions to such an extent that they keep on fighting among themselves. So, particularly the second Anglo-Maratha war, you'll find that all Maratha powers had a different ways to tackle the war, and they individually had a war with the British, and individually they get defeated, and they individually signed the subsidiary alliance treaty. Second point, it is the limited economic base. Limited economic base. Maratha had only Chauth and Sardeshmukhi. Chauth and Sardeshmukhi. Right? Maratha had Chauth and Sardeshmukhi. So Chauth and Sardeshmukhi was the only support base. However, the English, they were guided by the Industrial Revolution. So Industrial Revolution was very high. Third point. Here the third point, that Maratha had superiority of guerrilla warfare. This is the traditional war method of the Maratha, guerrilla warfare. And Maratha had a superior technique because with this guerrilla warfare, Maratha choked the Mughal also. So therefore, the state of Maratha which got subjugation, it's because of this thing. Okay, so guerrilla warfare. Fourth, the Maratha switch over to modern warfare. Maratha switch over to modern warfare, in which English had superiority. So the Maratha lost the ground of the traditional war, and at the same time Maratha entered in the modern warfare in which English had superiority. Fifth point. The Feeling of nationalism. Feeling of nationalism. Maratha had divided house. Divided house. Maratha had divided house. There were many feudal characters. Many feudal characters in Maratha. However, the English, they had a feeling of nationalism. They were fighting under one flag. They had feeling of nationalism and they were fighting under one flag. Feeling of nationalism. So these are the factors which led to the defeat of the Maratha. Okay, so ultimately you'll conclude that the feudalistic forces failed to compete against capitalistic forces. So feudalistic forces failed to compete against capitalistic forces. So Maratha representing the feudal force, there was a limited social economic thing, divided political structure. There were many flags within the Maratha, and English was fighting under one flag, and the capitalist forces. Sky is the horizon. So therefore, the feudalistic forces failed to compete against the capitalistic forces. And this is the ultimate reality that will prove that how Maratha. Loss of statesmanship. Loss of statesmanship. So, loss of statesmanship means the Maratha, they had a very powerful statesman like Nana Fadnavis, like Mahaji Scindia, Rani Ahilya Bai, Madhav Rao. They all had lost. They all had lost. And therefore, the Maratha political thing was in the hands of Baji Rao II. Was in the hands of Baji Rao II. So, Baji Rao II, he was involved in internal conflict of the Marathas. Internal conflict of the Marathas. Baji Rao II was involved in internal conflict of the Marathas. Involved in internal conflict of the Marathas. So next question. Look at the question. Despite limitations, the socio-religious reform movement in 19th century succeeded in bringing far-reaching changes in Indian society. Examine. despite limitations. So socio-religious reform movement was successful in bringing far-reaching consequences, changes in Indian society. Okay, so the Indian social system, Indian society. I told you that the 19th century Renaissance was very much intended to the compartmentalized section of the social and religious reform. At the same time, the reformers were basically concerned for their own religious thing. They did not came from the origin of their own religious parameters. And there are three trends of the socio-religious reform. The first trend was the Reformation. Second trend was revivalism. And third trend was status quoism. So Reformation, revivalism and status quoism. Reformation is actually the religious reformation. That is religious reformation. So here the Hindu religion was basically the target of reform, and reformers like Rajaram Mohan Rai wanted to retain some good values in Indian society and wanted to incorporate many Western values. So Reformation was a great event which in fact was a synthesis of Eastern and Western culture. So synthesis of Eastern and Western culture. This is called Reformation. Okay. So because of the Reformation, because of the Reformation, the social, economic, and political, three important parameters was discussed. Important parameters was discussed. So the social policy led to the rise of social economic policy, led to the rise of economic nationalism. Political philosophy led to the rise of political nationalism. So it had a long consequences. You'll write that both Reformation or the revivalism had created a very basic thing of the Indian social system, and that is not only the reform, the religious reform or the social reform or the cultural reform, but the level of awareness led to the rise of political nationalism and economic nationalism, the culmination of which was realized in the independence of India. So you'll write consequences in such a way. Then, like suppose we take the revivalism. Revivalism trend was represented by Dayanand Saraswati. Dayanand Saraswati. So revivalist trend was represented by Dayanand Saraswati and his Arya Samaj. And this Arya Samaj Dayanand Saraswati and Arya Samaj. So here Dayanand Saraswati himself predicted that we don't need to look towards the West. We don't need to look towards the West. But we have to revive the Vedic culture. Vedic culture. Vedic culture was a most powerful cultural thing where there was no social evils. There was no social evils. Vedic culture, there was no social evils. Okay, so religious thing was maintained, the hierarchy was maintained. So Vedic culture, there is no social things, social evils. So Dayanand Saraswati, he said, back to Vedas, back to Vedas. It was considered as ideal society. In the economic thing, the Swadeshi was the first person who used the word Swadeshi was Dayanand Saraswati. And he rejected that the industrial revolution and heavy industries. He said, Gram Uday Bharat Uday. And therefore, we must promote the Swadeshi ideals. Gram Uday Bharat Uday. So development of handicraft, development of cottage industries. So this had a huge impact on the social pattern of India. Huge impact on the social pattern. So Dayanand Saraswati, he was first person who used the word Swaraj, which became main slogan of the extremists in Indian National Congress and which became the main objective of the Gandhi. So therefore, India for Indians, Swaraj, these are the slogans which greatly created radical nationalism in Indian social system. Okay, but at the same time, the Dayanand Saraswati, he started Suddhi movement. That is reconversion of those Hindus who converted to other religion. Suddhi movement, reconversion of those Hindus who converted to other religion. Converted to other religion. Okay. So reconversion of those Hindus who converted to other religion. So it is a Swaraj. Shuddhi movement. So it ultimately led to the rise of communalism. The Muslims became very apprehensive. Then issue like Gauraksha movement. So obviously the Gauraksha movement was economic dimension because the protection of cow is Gram Uday Bharat Uday. But at the same time, the Muslims and the Christian, they became very apprehensive because of Gauraksha movement, and it had also added dimension in the communalism. So therefore, ultimately you will summarize that, you'll write that both nationalism and communalism was byproduct of socio-religious reform movement. Byproduct of socio-religious reform movement. And in 20th century, one leads to independence and other leads to partition. One leads to independence and other leads to partition. Okay, so both nationalism and communalism was byproduct of socio-religious reform movement. One leads to independence another leads to partition. So this is what this question is asking. Despite limitations, socio-religious reform movement in the 19th century succeeded in bringing far-reaching changes in Indian society. Okay, so this type of question you must tackle in lucid format. Use the short sentence. Don't use the very heavy words, and stick to the theme of the question. Stick to the theme of the question. Next question is related to the moderate and extremist. Moderate and extremist. The culmination of the differences between moderate and extremist reached to its climax in the Surat session, but the seeds of the splits were rooted in tussle between doctrine of constitutionalism and passive resistance. Okay, the tussle between doctrine of constitutionalism and passive resistance. Here, this is a very nice question. That differences between, look at the sentence, I'm reading again. The culmination of the differences between moderate and extremist reached to its climax in Surat session, but the seeds of the spirit were rooted in the tussle between doctrine of constitutionalism and passive resistance. So this is a very nice question. So you'll start that the both moderates and extremists were the parts of the Indian National Congress. But by the closing decades of the 19th century, the two powerful wings of the Indian National Congress had developed fundamental contradictions on the basis of mass base, on the basis of method and technique, and on the basis of objectivity. Okay. So therefore, you'll try to project in such a way that what is moderate and extremist differences. The first difference is related to mass base. Mass base. Moderates was elite class. Elite class. Moderates was elite class. Moderates have faith in British sense of justice. Moderates demanded that the Indians should be incorporated in ruling system. Moderates were not against the British rule, but un-British character of British rule. Un-British character of British rule. Okay, so I hope you understood the word that it's called un-British character of British rule. Means moderate said that what is there in England, this is not same thing in India. What is there in England is not there same thing in India. So we should have same institution and function here in India like England. And this is a main reason of the poverty also. What is there, the poverty in India is because of this. However, if you look at the mass base of extremists, they all were urban middle class. Urban middle class. They had a strong desire of cultural nationalism. a strong desire of cultural nationalism. They had strong desire of cultural nationalism. Urban middle class, a strong desire of cultural nationalism, and at the same time, the prophecy of governance, that is India to be managed by Indians. So moderates had a P4: prayer, petition, persuasion, philanthropy. Prayer, petition, persuasion, philanthropy. And however, the extremists, they believe in passive resistance. Okay, and this objective is called boycott. Means method is called passive resistance, technique is boycott. And objective, here we have a self-government, and here we have Swaraj. So the differences between self-government and Swaraj, I told you that none of them were asking for independence. Okay, so none of them were asking for independence. Self-government means persuasion to become part with the British, and Swaraj means demand as a matter of right. Demand as a matter of right. So self-government and Swaraj. Persuasion to become part with the British, and then demand as a matter of right. So this is what is called self-government and Swaraj. So here Lal, Bal and Pal. Lal, Bal and Pal. And here you'll find that constitutional opposition, all the leaders, whether it is Banerjee, Gokhale, Firoz Shah Mehta, Badruddin Tayyibji, they all were considered except Lal and Pal. And they had got huge momentum, huge support during the first decade of the 20th century, when the partition of Bengal, Swadeshi movement. So these are the factors which actually gave boost up to the extremist politics. Okay, but in the real sense, the partition of Bengal, the 1905 Banaras session, 1906 Calcutta session, these two sessions are very important in order to create the climax of differences between moderate and extremist. You know, 1905 in the Banaras session, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, he was the president. In this session, extremists demanded that the boycott program should include legislature also. Boycott program should include entire India. And however, the moderates said that no, partition of Bengal is a local issue. So we should confine ourselves in the local Bengal. 1906, first time the resolution on Swaraj was passed because aggressive attitude of the extremist. First time resolution on Swaraj was passed because of the aggressive attitude of the Britishers. And national education, Swadeshi, Swaraj, self-government, boycott, all are the programs passed in the 1906 Calcutta session, but the differences between moderate and extremist reached to its climax in the Calcutta session in the Surat session when extremists were expelled from the activity jungle Congress. So therefore, you have to write such a beautiful and classy word, right? What is this statement? Culmination of the difference between moderate and extremist reached to its climax in Surat. But the seeds of the split were rooted in the tussle between doctrine of constitutionalism and the passive resistance. So with these words, I hope all of you have understood the some important questions related to our discussion, and hope that you all of you had got benefit of that. So we'll continue also some of the important segments we will bring for you.